So it's spring ball. And this time of the year, we like to do kind of a breakdown of where the roster is at for Oklahoma football. So we're starting our position breakdowns, and you might as well start with the most important position in the sport, right? So we're going to start with quarterbacks. And now I went to practice over the weekend. And just so people know, there's a lot of people, hey, what recruits were there, what recruits weren't. I can't tell you. Sources inform me that Oklahoma did host class of 2040 athlete Cam Ikard. Just saying. Sources told me sources also told me he may have gotten a little distracted by all the footballs on the ground everywhere, and then that he really didn't take in very much of what was going on in the field. But sources also informed me it looked like he had a great time, really, and he hopes to be back soon, which is always important with the recruits.
They have an NIL presentation prepared.
It's in the works. It's in the works. No, but it was fun. It was the first time I got to take my son out to a practice. So he sat there and watched O-line individual with me. He was locked in, man. It was fun. It was cool.
That's awesome.
And I said, son, you see what these guys are doing? It is my life's goal for you to never do that. And then I walked him over to the quarterbacks and go, this is what you're going to do. So perfect transition into our breakdown of QBs, Ted.
That's awesome. Yes, the individual periods look a little bit different between those two position groups, don't they?
Slightly different. Okay, quarterbacks with the way the depth chart looks right now, right? You're looking at Dillon Gabriel as your QB1, and then I think the rest of this thing feels up in the air, right? I think when you look at Davis Bevel, Jackson Arnold, General Booty, Switzer's grandson, right? I got to assume when we get to the fall that Jackson Arnold's going to be the backup quarterback, but as a freshman, you got to earn that. He's only been there for a couple months, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard to digest everything it takes to play quarterback in Jeff Lebby's system. But with where we stand at quarterback right now, how do you feel about OU's QB situation?
I feel good about it. Now, it's still early, don't really fully know what to expect out of Jackson Arnold, but I expect Davis Bevel to be better than a year ago. I expect Dillon Gabriel to be better than a year ago. And I expect Jackson Arnold, because of the talent, to get caught up to the pack rather quickly. And because of the tools and skills that he has, I'm hopeful that he works his way into the backup quarterback role, because I think, it's not a position that you talk about a whole lot, backup quarterback, but the lack of any trust or real playmaking ability a year ago, it held our team back, especially whenever we got a glimpse of what life looks like without Dillon Gabriel. So to me, it's really important. The backup quarterback job is not something that we usually talk about, but right now, I think it has a lot to do with really what the ceiling of the offense could be next year.
I'm with you. And, one thing we've talked a lot about, right, is what that backup quarterback situation looked like a year ago, how frightening it was, right? That became rather evident in the Texas game. But we talk about how it affected Lebby and his play calling. And I was thinking about it as I was watching Dillon Gabriel at practice. Like, I never really thought about how the backup quarterback situation just affected the way that he played, right? And the way that he approached the game. Like, when you're going into a game, basically said, hey, I cannot get hurt. I've never been in that situation, like, as a player. I don't know how that affects you as a quarterback. It can't really help your performance. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the way plays are called. And, we kind of saw the same thing all year. Early in the first quarter, sometime, one of the first handful of possessions, Lebby would call Dillon Gabriel's number in the running game intentionally in a called run, just to get the defense aware that was something that they could do. We wouldn't see it again. Right Now, that doesn't mean that he wouldn't pull the ball down or create some things on his own. But as far as called running plays, we didn't see a whole lot of that. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way for quarterbacks to get in a rhythm and get in the kind of the feel of the game is whenever they're making plays with their legs as well. And obviously, it has huge effects on the passing game, on the running game, all of those things. So, yeah, if we're more comfortable with the backup position, I think that obviously opens a lot of things up. But the other part is Dillon Gabriel was never pushed at all last year.
Right.
Now, I'm not suggesting that
I'll suggest it. He wasn't, there was no competition in that room. Man, I'm just using what my eyes told me, okay?
Right. There wasn't, but I guess what I'm saying is that I'm not saying that because he wasn't pushed, like he wasn't trying to improve.
Right.
But it's just natural that whenever you're really comfortable and you know it's yours no matter what, not seeing a whole lot of things behind you that are, thrilling the coaches, then you settle into a groove. I expect that to be different. I expect Bevel, I expect Jackson Arnold to be making plays this summer. And, if Jackson Arnold gets out on the loose and he's running the football and everyone has some wow moments, I expect Dillon Gabriel to be like, okay, I need to answer and to up his game. So, I think all things included, it's important to have a player at backup quarterback and not just a body, a playmaker that is, ready to go in, that changes it for Lebby and pushing Dillon Gabriel to get better.
Yeah. So the thing that stood out to me about him at practice over the weekend, he really looks like a guy that has full control of the operation of the offense.
Dillon, you're talking about Dillon Gabriel,
Dillon.
right? Yeah.
Dillon was really vocal as I've seen him. And now he's not a rah-rah guy, right? But it was as assertive as I've seen him, especially on the practice field. Just looks, and it makes total sense, but just looks more comfortable than when we saw him with those practices we went out to last spring, right? Just looks way more comfortable. Looks like he knows he's the guy, like all those things. But when we're just looking at the roster, like he has to be better than he was a year ago. When you look at the numbers, like the numbers weren't awful by any means, right? They were rock solid, but 62% over, a little over 3,000 yards, 26 and 6, touchdowns to interceptions. Now he did have the 6 rushing touchdowns, but those numbers, they just have to significantly improve. And when you think back to what we complained about a year ago, right, with Dillon Gabriel holding on to the ball too long and taking some sacks, right? That was something that bothered us. Missing high for whatever reason. Remember, his accuracy would just kind of disappear at times. Would miss high on some of those intermediate throws. Could not connect on a lot of those deep balls, right? Missed some chances for some easy, explosive touchdowns, especially to Drake Stoops for whatever reason. But there just wasn't a ton from him in the running game. And Ted, I don't know about you, man, but I expect all of that to improve. And Jackson Arnold pushing him is part of that, but it's also like I think Dillon's at a point in his career where it's like he knows like he's got to step it up to secure a football future, if you will. But like he's got to play a lot better this season. And I think that's motivation enough. I know we'll probably make a big deal about, Jackson Arnold being behind him and what that means for Dillon's motivations, but he seems like a guy that's just, self-motivated to be the best version of himself he can be. And he's got to be better than he was a year ago in order for him to, I assume, achieve the goals he wants to achieve in football.
Yeah. I expect him to be better in all categories. Like statistically speaking, I expect him to be way better. You mean, was he 25 and 6 touchdowns?
Yeah, 26 and 6, 25 and 6, one of those.
I expect 35 touchdowns through the air for him. 6 touchdowns on the ground. I expect double digits rushing touchdowns from him. 315 rushing yards. I expect him to be around the 700-yard mark in rushing numbers. That's obviously these are assuming he's healthy, everything's good all the way through, and he needs to take his completion percentage into the high 60s. And I think all of those things he's totally capable of. I don't think it's going to be that difficult, and it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but off of the performance we saw a year ago and the kind of the holes in what we saw out there, I just expect everything to be better. And I don't think it's outlandish to ask for some of those and see some of those numbers come up quite a bit.
Yeah. I just expect him to be more aggressive.
Yeah.
With the football. I thought, you look at only having 6 interceptions, right? That's great, but there are points in games where I felt like he needed to let it rip and take a chance. Like, you got to give guys chances to make plays. Mm-hmm. I think we'll see more of that coming in this year. I think he probably realized he got to be a little more aggressive with the football. And then I expect his presence in the running game to improve, right? And to increase. Mm-hmm. And it's not just because Jackson Arnold's going to be there, so it doesn't feel like the sky is falling if Dillon Gabriel has to go out in a game. But I just think that has to be a bigger piece of the offense if you want to take this offense to the highest level it can be. Like, you see the offenses throughout college football, there's typically, and it doesn't have to be a ton, but there's typically a QB run game factor to it. Right? Just think about CJ Stroud and how he used his legs. And I know some of that stuff was scrambles, but in the college football playoff, what Stetson Bennett could do with his legs for these last couple of years for Georgia, like, Tennessee. It's an important part of football, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It's critical. Caleb Williams at USC, great with his legs. Cam Rising does a really good job in the quarterback running game. Bo Nix at Oregon, who had his best year ever, had 15 plus rushing touchdowns. Yeah. Now, it's not something that everyone does, but it's for most people, if you don't just have the best players across the board, it's the trump card for defenses, right? It's a way to outnumber them, and it's always going to be a piece of it. And the more you can use that, the more of a threat it is. It really wreaks havoc on how a defense can defend. And last year against Oklahoma, they settled in on us. Teams really settled in, and they knew exactly what they were going to get. We didn't have many weapons down the stretch, and I think that Dillon he's obviously good in the open field. He's not the most dangerous runner, but he's pretty daggum good. He's very capable out there. So, a lot of these things are, and we talk about it expecting the other pieces to be there, right? We expect him to get the help he needs from his receivers. And, he's not going to have big numbers if the offensive line doesn't come together. So, just talking about him and his improvements are kind of just going off of using last year's offensive line performance as a baseline. Like, if we get the things we got last year, he should still have some pretty big improvement.
I will say this, just seeing the O-line in person over the weekend, it's going to be the best looking O-line we've had in a while.
And that means something, right?
It means more than nothing.
Right.
That makes sense. Like, I saw Rouse up close and personal for the first time. Dude looks like he should be starting at tackle at Oklahoma. Like, he looks the part. I think Guyton, I mean, he looks lean. He looks good, man. I think he's got a chance to be the best player on the team.
Wow.
Like, he looked great, but we'll see how it comes together. But yeah, quarterback, it's not just all on them. Clearly,
right.
Line's got to be good. Receivers, tight ends, everything, run game, all that stuff. But when it comes to Dillon's performance in particular, right, you feel really good about him being your starting quarterback, right? But in order to feel good about where this team wants to go, right, Big 12 championship, college football playoff, we've talked about it a lot. He's got to step it up, got to step up his level of performance. And I think he's more than capable of doing that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Not just more than capable. I fully expect it. And And I think the fans should too. And I think the coaches do. I think everyone does.
Yeah. Okay. No offense to Davis Bevel or General Booty or Switzer or any other quarterback they have on the roster, but there's really only one other quarterback I think we need to talk about. Is that I feel like I'm not trying to be mean, but that's the way it feels to me.
Yeah, that's right.
And in Jackson Arnold, if you pick the starting quarterback by how impressive the ball looks coming out of a guy's hand, Jackson Arnold would be OU's starting quarterback. The dude can absolutely rip it. Ted, I was like, oh, and you and I, we had a couple people say, hey, wait till you see this kid throw in person. I get it now. And I know people kind of have an interesting opinion on Landry Jones one way or another, but that dude could rip it.
Mm-hmm.
And the ball coming out of Arnold's hand, it reminds me of how it looked coming out of Landry's, just on a rope, tight spiral. It's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. And it's like, meow. You're just like, oh, okay, yeah. That's what an elite arm can look like. Right. And it looks effortless, man. It really does.
Well, that's good. And you got to be able to have the whip now, man. There's the mechanics at quarterback. It's changed. I mean, there's a lot of it's the same, but the RPO stuff has really kind of reintroduced a different type of throwing motion or style where it's quick, and you've got to have that whip to be able to just drive it in there right after a hard play fake. So it's good to hear that he's got that type of pop coming off just natural. I mean, when guys throw it that way naturally, you just don't have to do a whole lot of mechanical work. That gives you a good jump start on your career.
Yeah, and it's not exactly, like Baker's fastball where you're just like, oh my gosh.
It looks like he puts his whole body into it. Yeah.
Like his body and soul into it.
Uh-huh.
That's not this looks more like a Kyler situation where you're like the dude's barely flicking it and just meow. You're like, okay, that's what it's supposed to look like. But clearly for Arnold, it's about absorbing the system and learning as much as he possibly can. I played a high level of high school football, but there's such a big jump from high school to college, especially at that level. And he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's plenty big enough for college football now. And the live arm, man, that's the live arm and the mobility. That's the combination you're looking for. And there's just no doubt this kid absolutely has it. Now, there's a lot that goes into playing quarterback. It's not just having a strong arm and being able to move around. Like those are key components of it. But if he can get to where he needs to get from just on the mental side of things, dude's going to be a special player. Like I'd be really surprised if he wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, I don't know if you can always tell right away, but there's like when good quarterbacks, high level, 5-star quarterbacks go to college, there seems to be like a quick divergence between the guys that can see the defense and the guys that can't. And because it's different in high school, you're for the most part, like 99% of the time are locking onto guys, and that's where you're throwing the football. And in college, you just can't get away with that. You can sometimes, but you're going to make big mistakes. You're going to force or they're going to force turnovers on you, and it's just never going to go like you expect. And it usually kind of happens right away. Like if you don't hear that this kid has it early, sometimes you just don't ever end up hearing it. And, it's interesting to see kind of where he falls, if he's able to see what the defense is doing, understand the offense, understand the adjustments that his wide receivers are going to make, and be able to play the mental game. Because, there's a lot of guys. I mean, not a lot, but, just there's guys that have the physical traits and can never get it to the field because of the mental aspect. It's not it's not as easy as just knowing your playbook, right? There's way more to it than that, and we'll be able to see pretty quickly if he's got the it factor.
Quarterback is hard. It's a really hard position to play, but just from talking to people, seems like that kid's living up there at the facility, trying to absorb it all, trying to get up to speed, and out at the practice was just constantly communicating with Dillon Gabriel, the other quarterbacks. Just, I like seeing that. It seems like he's curious. He's not scared to ask questions. It seems like he has the makeup physically and mentally, like just the drive to be great. Mm-hmm. And we'll see what ends up coming of it. We'll see when his time comes at Oklahoma, but it doesn't seem like if he doesn't succeed at Oklahoma, I don't think it's going to come from a lack of caring. It seems like this kid gets it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exciting that he's, and always think of young guys, they're always locked in and full throttle. And a lot of times it's just, how do guys respond when they make their first mistake out there on the field, on television and in front of 80,000 people in person? Like, some guys are able to wipe it away. Next snap, next series, let's continue to go, and the confidence remains sky high. Other guys can tend to go in a hole a little bit, tighten up, and lose that just kind of free-flowing ability to just kind of go out there and let it rip and let yourself make plays. So, I mean, that's kind of another thing you got to watch with young quarterbacks. But, he as of right now, it sounds like everyone is thrilled with where he is.
Yeah. Only 3 practices in, right? Long way to go in the spring. But anything else you want to say about where this roster currently sits at the quarterback position? Anything else?
No. I have big expectations for the position this year.